So, welcome back, everybody. And first of all, thank you for tuning into AYO News. We really appreciate it. And let me tell you something straight off. If you have ever thought about locating your business in Isle of Man, please keep watching this video. As we have here today with us a proud Maxman, Chris Kissack, who's, by the way, leads Digital Isle of Man's esports proposition. So, Chris, thank you for joining us here today.
Oh, you're welcome. What an amazing intro. Thank you.
I try my best. So I know you're very passionate talking about the video gaming and the esports, right? So how did you get into the world of esports and find yourself in your current position?
Well, I was just, normally before you enter into a video call and your camera's up, and I was just looking at the camera this morning and thinking, wow, I look really old. But then I thought, I'm 40, and answering your question, I've been playing video games and passionate about video games for pretty much 40 years. I'm sure my mother's got a photograph of me with an old Atari joystick, and I've been just very passionate about video games, the video game space, competitive video games, and as it merged into esports as well. I've never been good enough as a pro player or even an amateur player to make a career out of it, but I'm very good at, I think, about problem solving in the corporate space. And then the opportunity arose to join the Isle of Man government and to kind of lead the Isle of Man government's pathway into esports. So I worked for the Department for Enterprise. And as you introduced me better than I could, in the digital agency, kind of flying the flag for the Isle of Man in the esports space.
What kind of the esports businesses are currently based in Isle of Man? And maybe you can pitch yourself a bit, or the agency. So what it makes such a great base, especially for the esports and the video gaming?
Well, it's the same as every industry, really. I mean, the world's biggest esports betting platforms are based here on the Isle of Man. As you know, you've had some of them on your show. And we do have the advantages of being an offshore jurisdiction. We've got favorable tax regimes. But beyond that, I mean, we're very, very good here on the Isle of Man in being a home for your business, regardless of industry. And we've got a lot of skilled companies here, whether or not that's a law firm, a corporate service provider. We're very welcoming as a government.
Do you think that small jurisdictions have advantage in today's digital world? Because look at the Malta or even the Bermuda. They're trying to be the crypto hub and Isle of Man. So do you think there is a certain advantage to be based in a small jurisdiction?
From a jurisdictional point of view, working in the esports space directly, the beauty about doing business in the Isle of Man, as with any small island, but the Isle of Man more than most, is that you can have a rapid succession of meetings with key individuals or key stakeholders that are vital to the growth of your business, without having to go across a tube and travel from one side of a city to another. You can have a meeting within government with a regulator, you can go and speak to your lawyer, you can do all of that in one morning. And for startups, especially startups that I've seen land here and grow here, that's a huge advantage to them.
Also, another point is that we're talking about a lot here at AYO.NEWS that education system is falling apart, right? I mean, it's failing, and there needs to be done, the changing and be stuff. The things needs to be done in different things. I mean, that's the fact. I mean, we all know it. So how is the digital Isle of Man working with the island's education system to actually ensure that the young people have the right kind of education, skills, and knowledge to enter the digital workforce?
That's a really good question. I mean, we've done a lot of initiatives on the island to identify our skill gaps and then start to educate them. And I had an email, this is going to sound made up, but I assure you it's genuine. I had an email from the college this morning on asking me to come in and speak to their some of their students on they've been set a paper on marketing in digital space, and the large majority of them chose esports. So I'm going to be coming in and speaking to them about different marketing strategies that have taken place in the world of esports and how it's evolved. And I'm really fortunate to be in the role that I've got, to be able to get in front of, the future generation of business leaders and startup owners and decision makers. And we've really embraced that as an island. We've seen that if you're a business and you want to come here and you want to build your business here, yes, we've got really good incentives for you to relocate your staff here. But ultimately, what we want is, as a business owner, if you want to hire locally, you want to have the comfort that, there is this new generation of skilled marketers, web designers, graphic designers, coders here. And so we've been doing really well in that space. And some of my colleagues for example, in the IoT side of things and the Bitcoin side, they've been doing a lot of educational events here on the island.
But definitely with my next question, those college students would not have a problem. I would say that. But I mean, there are still so many people out there who doubt esports, right? I mean, surprisingly, there are still a lot of people out there. And I know you're passionate about this topic. So can you tell us what makes the esports actually sports?
And you can answer depending on how you answer that question. I mean, you can go down the road of, well, look, there are some of the biggest brands in the world, whether or not it's Mercedes-Benz, Red Bull, BMW, the energy drinks, the biggest brands in the world are associated with esports. You've got betting operators just the same way as they sponsor football teams are sponsoring esports organizations. It has, with regards, we've had the same conversations. If you have individuals who are skeptical that it takes skill or it takes training, just the same as another sport, then they only have to spend time with a group who are trying to be the next FaZe Clan or Godsend or 100 Thieves. They train just as hard as any other sport. They have coaches, they have nutritionists, they review their previous matches. They take it seriously, and so they should do. It's here to stay. It's not even a new industry. I mean, the first tournaments that took place were in the 70s and 80s, so it just wasn't called esports back then. So competitive video games has been around for a long, long time.
But by the way, what's your favorite, the game to play?
I play games with my boys, and it depends. So I have been playing Fortnite with him and doing duos. To play myself, I'd say Hearthstone. Mm-hmm. So that's more out of necessity when I was traveling a lot, because I could play it on my mobile or on my tablet when I'm waiting in airports and delays, and it's and you don't need as fast hand-eye coordination to play something like Hearthstone. But I love to watch Counter-Strike. I mean, Counter-Strike is something that I grew up watching and playing as well. What about yourself? I mean, I said I was going to flip this when we spoke and hit you with some questions. But what about yourself? What have you been playing? What have you been enjoying watching?
Feel free to interview me, because there's not much people who would, so I don't mind it. But to be honest, to be perfectly honest, I'm rubbish when it comes to video gaming. I'm not any pro, definitely not that. But I have to say that the Assassin's Creed Valhalla occupied my lockdown time, I have to say. And then I don't not mind even like racing stuff as F1, to race with my boyfriend. I mean, as I do not have a kids, but I got you, because I know that I repeat this in every second interview, but is it so true? Like, it's number one reasoning of all executives, co-founders, and the CEOs of all esports organizations, that they connect with their children through the esports. I mean, it's crazy, but it's the number one reasoning that everyone is really happy to spend their time with their children.
Yeah. And since you started this channel and started the getting more involved in speaking to people that work in the esports kind of space, what's been the most surprising thing that you've found out, that you've discovered from spending more time looking at what's going on in the esports space?
I mean, so the people are very friendly and cool. with the stuff. That would be the first thing, which I really enjoy. And the second thing I really found fascinating, how today's generation is turning into this area, and it's becoming kind of the lifestyle thing for the Gen Zs and the millennium. And it's fascinates me that maybe as when I was 10, I loved Backstreet Boys. So these days, these days the kids loves their the ninja or their favorite esports players. I mean, I found it very fascinating how the random kids becoming superheroes and idols for this generation. I mean, I found it fascinating, and I also found very interesting that diversity is very important for this industry. And the nerds, the random kids can become super popular, and they can find themselves in what they are doing. As I mean, look at the Backstreet Boys. I mean, in the 19s, if you were a random or bad looking person, I think you wouldn't make it in the showbiz. So let's be honest. So, but like I really find it very positive for today's generation that they can find themselves. And the very last point, and I know I talk a lot, is that it's ultimate unifier. I mean, it's ultimate unifier, and it unified the people from different walks of life, genders and ages. So yeah, that's why I'm doing esports. I would say.
Great.
Yeah.
So normally, if we move the camera around slightly, do you still have Backstreet Boys posters on just the side of the wall? Just maybe.
Yeah, I have a full wall. I have a room full of the posters. I'm no. Actually, no. But I found it. I found it. I mean, I will never forget when I see the video streaming of the tournament, and there were like these thousands of the folks of different the ages, and they were just cheering crazy. It was pure madness to cheer up their favorite teams and the players. And I was like, whoa. And first you do not understand that, but you find it fascinating. I mean, and certainly it does not really matter if you are involved or interested in the video gaming and esports, but it's certainly very fascinating thing.
But also, just to kind of segue in, I suppose, from an Isle of Man point of view, in that these independent developers and these indie studios that are looking at making a new title that could potentially catch the wind of esports, creating them here on the Isle of Man. If I can craft a narrative and a story to attract them here, because they zero corporation tax, zero capital gains tax, but also just the fact being able to work with these development studios here on the island and say, look, come here, work here. That excites me quite a lot. The other side, I think, is more of the grassroots side of things. So we're doing a lot locally on the grassroots side. There's local tournaments, more and more local tournaments taking place in different titles. So that's great to see this new generation. It does make me feel a little bit old now and again, because I remember when I was sort of 12, 13, going to LAN parties and going to internet cafes, carrying the big computers and big monitors in the back of the car and spending all day there. But it's interesting and exciting to see how that's evolved. So that still excites me.
Exactly. And where do you actually, I know that's all just, predictions, but we can have all our own predictions. So where do you see it's going, all the esports and the video gaming? If you can, what do you think is going to happen like in 10 years?
10 years,
Yeah,
right?
5. Okay, like
I think
let's. I wanted to be very futuristic. I wanted to be very futuristic. Like let's say 5, because it's very fast emerging industry.
Okay, I can give you 5, and then if there's time, I'll give you 10 as well. So 5 years, I'd say you're going to see more and more brands. Now, these are sponsors. These are products getting more and more evolved digitally in the games themselves. This is in-game advertising, controlling characters which are sponsored by a particular brand, maps and weapons and vehicles which are specifically being created by a BMW or by a Monster Energy or Red Bull, a Red Bull energy drink, which is a power-up within the game, as an example. I can see more and more brands getting more exposure within the games themselves. I think from the competitive side within esports, I think we'll see more and more traditional sports support pathways coming forward. So these are more the nutritionists, the sports psychologists, the coaches that you would normally find in behind the scenes of a rugby team or a football team. I think those guys will become more to the forefront. And they're getting at the moment, if you're in the scene, you know the names of some really good coaches. But I think over the next 4 to 5 years, as players themselves start to retire, so these, the players that we're following now, as they start to retire, you'll either have some that will go down owning their own teams, but you'll have some that will go into coaches. And it's those coaches that I think will become bigger personalities in themselves. And as a younger generation starts to grow up and follow it more, you'll see more of the storylines come to the forefront, the rivalries between the teams, the grudge matches between players that now are being coached by, a grandmaster who was, made such a big wave when he was playing pro. And I think you'll see more of that. I'd like to see more from a VR point of view. I say this every time I'm asked this question. But I think the advancements of VR and AR, I hope will start to come to the forefront, and see more and more artists. There was an article I read. There was by a Warner Brothers exec, and he was saying that when they have meetings with their artists, when they bring them into the boardroom, the questions they ask them is not what single you're working on or what album you're working on, is do you play video games? Great. And if you look at number of artists that are starting to step into the video game and esports space just over the last few years, we're going to see more of that, because it's a way for them to connect with their fans in a way that previous generation of artists could never do. So yeah, and I'll see that the Isle of Man will be at the forefront of a location to do esports business. I have to get that in there. That's what I want to see in 10 years' time. Absolutely, yeah.
So definitely the Isle of Man is gonna be the biggest esports hub. And I'm quite sure I'm quite sure you're gonna get there, because you're very, very active when it comes to the community. And in the end, it's all about that, to be authentic and real and proactive, and everything comes. But what do you think? Actually, I have to ask you on that. What do you think about the esports betting?
Esports betting. I see the guys that are, if you take, as I said at the start, in my opinion, the three biggest esports betting platforms in the world, Rivalry, Unicorn, and Lookbox, they're all here on the Isle of Man. I see other sportsbook betting platforms taking esports more seriously, seeing that and being aware that if they want to step into the space, they've got to do it with authenticity. Mm-hmm. As the three of the guys have done, because if you don't, it will fall flat. Those guys have set the expectation of authenticity so high. I think it is important for the space. So people are always going to bet on the outcome of a sporting event. They always are. So it's important to ensure that there are a regulator like the Isle of Man government can step in and help regulate esports betting platforms but I think there will be more and more acceptance from the esports space on the importance of building relationships with the betting world. You've got the betting world, which is, the most highly regulated industry on the planet. You've got the esports industry, which is to a large part unregulated. So that there's a lot that the two can learn from each other. They can learn from each other with regards customer and player retention. But I see more and more publishers and developers of the games who maybe 10 years ago were a little bit cautious about being associated with betting operators, understanding the amount of money that they will put into whether or not it's sponsoring a team or sponsoring a tournament ultimately is good for the growth of the industry. I mean, the fans want to see teams having more money to grow and to purchase players and to build out of their HQ and take on these coaches and grow their infrastructure. And it's just the same way as if they were to sponsor a football team. Yeah. So I think it's important that the two worlds kind of talk to each other a little bit more. And like you said at the start of this called education. And education is important not just for in the schools, but it's important for different industries. And whether or not that's the betting industry, it's the hospitality industry, that there's industries which need to be educated authentically on the esports ecosystem and how they can bring value into that space.
Exactly. I could not agree with you more. I believe as well that both worlds, as I'm dipping into the new world and I know very well the old one, so they can learn a lot from each other. That's for sure. Especially for example, the esports betting operators as a rivalry you said, or even Unicorn, any of the Unlockbox. I mean, they are genius content creators. I mean, they doing very good job with marketing and the content creation. So, and on fan engagement, it's completely on another level. So I really believe that they can learn, and even and as because license, the esports betting operators are new to the kind of license structure, and all the bureaucracy. So definitely from that kind of point of view, even the traditional operators can offer a lot. And as you said, they need to both educate a bit about each other, and they can definitely find the way, because I think we have to try to diminish that kind of stigma they have about it, because as you mentioned, the maybe 2-3 years ago, the traditional gambling operators would never want to be involved with the esports, and the esports don't want to be involved with the traditional gambling, so there is a time to improve this stuff, right? Exactly.
Absolutely. And if it's done authentically and wanting to bring value, then on both sides it'll be welcomed, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, exactly. So my very, very last question is, Chris, so where do you see the Isle of Man? I know we said that it's gonna be for sure esports hub, but from the practical point of view, what are like a long-term plans? What are your next steps? Let's say for next year.
Is really not lose focus on supporting the grassroots that's happening here. So we've got some great tournaments and tournament organizers. So I'm supporting them locally on how they can run their tournaments authentically, and what we can support them from a government point of view. I think, the Isle of Man, sports is in the island's DNA, and whether or not that's motorcycling, we've got one of the most accomplished Rocket League players here on the island. He's also part of Team GB snowboarding, and we have no snow here really. But what we were able to do with him was get behind his ambitions to be a professional sportsman. And unfortunately, he's decided to go the snowboarding route than the Rocket League route, but he's a great example of how he was able to tap into our coaching network here and our sports support network here. And if I can raise the island's profile as being welcoming to the esports industry, if you're an academy player or you're a world-class org, we welcome sportsmen and women, and whether or not that's in traditional sports or esports, and we will support them. And it's a great place for them to be here and consider making a home here. So I'd really like to see that. And with that comes, I'm spending a lot of time with our local talent on helping nurture casters, observers, all of the things that we need to help bolster our local esports ecosystem here. So I really see over the next 12 months, the Isle of Man being recognized as an authentic place to consider doing esports business, whether or not that's structuring your company or dropping some of your players here.
That's a wonderful answer, I have to say, and I will wish you luck with that, and I'm quite sure that you're gonna achieve all your goals, and we're gonna keep you up with you. And thank you so, Chris, for sharing your insight with us. I'm quite sure that many of the viewers will find it very interesting. And I have to point out, if you are thinking about locating your business in Isle of Man, please get in touch with the agency or with you and check the details for yourself, because let's say that Isle of Man is quite a special place on the map, and more people should know about it, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Chris, thank you again, and have a wonderful day.